Good morning. Welcome to the Scholars Learning video podcast series. My name is John Carroll. I'm the General Manager of the K-12 Custom Curriculum Services Division, and I'm your host for this morning's session. I am thrilled that joining me this morning is Erin Conklin, Director of K-12 Social Studies at Duval County Public Schools. Good morning, Erin.
Good morning.
By way of background for our listeners, Duval County Public Schools is in Jacksonville, Florida. It has about 130,000 students, 200 schools. As a result, it's the 20th largest district in the country and the 6th largest district in Florida. At Scholars Learning, the XanEdu division, we've had the privilege to work with Erin over the past couple of years in helping her execute against her vision of making social studies more engaging and more relevant to her diverse student population. And during that time in 2021, in fact, I was happy to see and thrilled to see Erin receive the Harry T. Moore Teaching for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Award for her tireless and passionate approach to teaching civil rights and civil liberties in her community, and in fact throughout the state through her roles on numerous state committees as Vice President of the Florida Association of Social Studies Supervisors, and through her role as an adjunct professor with the University of North Florida. So Erin is extremely busy, and again, I appreciate her taking some time to share her thoughts and perspectives with our listeners. So Erin, let's turn it over to you. I was hoping you could share with our listeners your career path that led you to your current role at Duval.
Of course. I began as a classroom teacher. I have taught high school. I taught in Charleston, South Carolina first, in one of our inner city schools, teaching social studies there for our first-time ninth graders. Then I moved back to Jacksonville, Florida, and here I started in middle school and teaching history, and then kind of fell in love with civics because we had a new state mandate that civics had to be offered in middle school, and just really enjoyed and had a passion for teaching students about our local government, the state government, and the federal government, and just having fun with that. As I began to progress, I decided I really wanted to work and help other teachers in our district. And so one of the things that I did was I began to become a district social studies specialist. I worked with numerous schools with their social studies civics teachers and helping them improve student engagement, their state test scores, and just their pedagogy in their classroom and being able to create those connections with their students. From there, I decided to become a school administrator. And then, as we know, COVID happened and it kind of changed everything for a lot of educators. And one of the things that I realized that I really missed during that time was working more with social studies and working with those teachers more one-on-one and not being such the evaluative administrator going in their classrooms. I really liked being able to make those connections with the teachers. So I saw there was an opportunity to move over to the district office leading the social studies department, and that had always been a very big goal and dream of mine, was to lead social studies for a school district. And then I just happened to interview and get the position, and it's been great since. I've been working with our teachers. I have a great staff that helps and supports me in all my new adventures whenever I have an idea, like creating this one-of-a-kind book, and working with our local students and really driving that passion for local history, because I realize that's something that we have been missing here.
Yeah, all right. Well, thanks for that background. Yeah, amazingly tireless effort. As I mentioned earlier, you are extremely busy and staying involved, and hats off to you for your involvement across the state with all the initiatives, as well as within the district, of course. I had mentioned earlier that your district, and I think I got this right, has about 200 schools. And as a result, you're the 20th largest district in the country. So pretty big district. So what I was curious about is if you could share with our listeners, what are some of the challenges a district your size faces in general? And the things that come to mind for me are teacher retention, changing legislation, updating standards. I'm sure there's other challenges in a large district, but if you could share some of your thoughts on that.
Oh, definitely. I think one of the biggest challenges, and I always share this when uh, organizations or I'm talking to groups about my district, is because we are so large, our land mass is huge. And I have schools that you can look out the window and see the beautiful Atlantic Ocean and see the beach. Then I have schools that are inner city, and then I have a school that has a cow pasture and in their backyard, and they teach about mowing and agriculture. So it's about a good 30-minute drive outside of our town. So we have everything in between as well. Arts, we have magnet schools and so forth. So that is one of our biggest, I think hurdles to get over, is making sure that when I work with teachers that I'm meeting the needs for their schools and their students, because every single one of them is completely different. Teacher retention in this past 2 years has been a really big challenge as well. We have teachers that are quickly leaving the classroom. They're moving into private sector. They're moving into charter schools. They're moving just out of education altogether. So making sure that you're really there to support them and let them know that it's okay. We got your back. Don't worry. And making sure you provide that support for them. I think another big issue with our schools is, we just have a lot of changing legislation. We're getting ready again to start the school year. Teachers are back this week. Students come back next. And we just received information about, AP psychology. So we have several schools where we're trying to figure out what class do we offer, since we're not able to offer AP psychology. The College Board and the governor are having quite a bit of issues. So we want to make sure that, we are giving students a chance to be equitable in that course.
Yeah, so given that, I mean, and certainly across the state, across the country for that matter, there's lots of changing legislation, changing state standards, and primarily or mostly in social studies, as you point out. In Florida, certainly is gets a lot of time and attention in the media for that. I imagine it's challenging to support your teachers, or I guess let me ask it a different way. What are the challenges in supporting your teachers and making them feel confident in the classroom with all of the changes? And how do they how do you help them stay apprised of what they should be teaching, what they shouldn't be teaching in such a, sort of area of change?
Yes. So one of the things that's really hard is because it changes constantly. And then there's such mixed messages out in the media. And one of the things that we really tried to do, and tomorrow we're going to be having a training with our teachers, is just to really explain and show them exactly what each state statute says, where they can go and be guided for support, let them know that we're here to help them. So whenever they pick out a resource or they use something, we're able to say, yes, this is perfect, use it. Or no, this might not be so great. Let's try and find something else. So we really tried to help front load our teachers with a bunch of information and resources, so they're not having to worry about what they're pulling into their classroom. Our group does a great job putting together in-depth curriculum guides where we add different primary sources, resources, readings, and different things, so that we can make sure teachers aren't having to worry about if they pull a book or a certain, photograph, that they would be in jeopardy of, losing their position.
Mm. Got it. Thank you. And you and I crossed paths when you had a vision of producing a Duval County Public Schools version of African American history. In fact, I've got the book for your electives course. And we were very happy that you reached out to us to help you kind of pull that together. And want to get your kind of thoughts as to, when you had this idea, what were your goals and what was your approach in customizing? Why was there a need to even customize an African American history course from your district perspective?
Yes. So, given the climate of Florida, one of the things that I was tasked with when I first came into this position was trying to find a resource for African American history since we weren't up for adoption yet. And one of the problems as I was getting resources in was, I would find one, but it was on the collegiate level. And I knew, being such a diverse population in my schools, that not all my students were going to be able to read on that level. Or I'd find resources that were biased or they left out parts of history. The other thing is that I realized a lot of our students really had this desire to learn more about their local history. We actually had some schools that had some student protests, and they were concerned that we were not focusing on African American history, local African American history. So we really wanted to make sure that we brought that to the forefront. And so I thought, well, since I can't find a book that has local history in it, or even sometimes just Florida history in it, it would be a page in the back of somebody's, textbook. I wanted to create something that when students opened it, they could feel like, oh, I drive by that place every single day, or I know where that is. My grandmother lives in that neighborhood. So just for them to be able to see that there's stuff, or even when they travel across Florida and they go to, Tampa or something, they're like, oh, I know where that is. I've met that person, or why that college is named after someone. So I really wanted to focus in on just kind of building something that was special for our teachers. Also, because since it does have mostly primary sources in it, it's not somebody's opinion on how they perceive history. It's not their perspective. It's not the authors. So therefore, we didn't have to worry about somebody giving their perspective and students taking that and believing that they would be able to learn from that source and form their own perspectives, their own opinion, and their own ideas. So that was the biggest thing. And just hearing our students, they really cried out for local history. They wanted to hear and see it.
And by local, just to for our audience sake, for local, and you mentioned it, but just to reiterate, you're meaning like Jacksonville and Tampa, like certainly national and state history is in there,
yeah.
But you've asked us to actually find some local historic events in your neighborhood, like within 10-mile radius of your school buildings. So that was kind of interesting. That's, I think, one of the first times we got that local on our side of doing custom curriculum. And I'm curious how what's been your sort of stakeholder reaction? How do teachers, students, the community, how have they reacted either positively or negatively to your efforts in that area?
So yeah, a lot of our teachers, pretty much all of our teachers, love it because they love being able to have a book to use. They love being able to be able to point out some of that local history. And it makes it very easy for them to stay along with those standards and have that confidence in teaching African American history instead of just moving in a direction where they might be a little more timid on teaching about a certain subject. And I mean, administratively, people have liked it. The community has received it very well. I get lots of calls asking for people if they could buy one of my books, if they can come up here and purchase one. We have had some community members that have voiced their opinion in a negative way, more of they wish there was, more local history, or they were concerned about a certain asset that was in there or source. They just didn't understand why we decided to include that instead of something else. But then, I have to remind them that we still have to teach standards, and a lot of it's because they didn't understand the course progression. So we've had some pushback, but not much. I mean, it's mostly, again, just people not understanding what has to be taught in the course, or that we couldn't just fill it with all local history as much as we wanted to. We had to have some of the national and the state items in there as well. So it's been really well received. We were excited last year when we made the teachers edition because the teachers absolutely love it, that they are able to have some sample answers for the questions that are in there, because some of our teachers, even they're not from the School of Education, or they're not like history majors, they might be coming from the banking world, and being able to see those answers in that teacher's edition has been wonderful for them, to be able to kind of gain that knowledge that they need. But it's definitely been so helpful to say that this is what we have. And there's that local history piece, there's that state history piece, so students can really see where they're coming from in this community.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's interesting. Sounds like some of your community wanted more local history, and that was, one of the, sort of, from my perspective at least, one of the few attempts or rare attempts that district has actually gone to that level of incorporating very local history. And it sounds like that not only do they like it, but they wanted more, or were questioning, like, why don't we throw some of this in here as well? Your point, if I understood it, is at the end of the day, you've got to also align to the state standards, and you've got to teach what the standards describe. You can't get too extraneous with regards to adding extra content, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, last question. Any other thoughts or insights to share with our listeners regarding the challenges of meeting the broad needs of your various constituent groups? And this isn't unique to Duval, right? But for most people in your role, you've got a pretty broad range of stakeholders: students, teachers, administration, state legislators, school boards, parents, everyone, of course. Social studies seems to get a lot of attention in that regard, with regards to various stakeholders wanting to, voice their opinion or concern about how things should be taught. Just curious if you have any thoughts on or advice on the challenges of having such a broad range of stakeholders.
Yes, it's definitely a difficult time to be leading social studies in the state of Florida, and most likely in other states as well. The nice thing that I do keep reminding myself is since we are getting this attention, it's helping us move forward in some type of way where social studies wasn't really expressively taught, or people didn't, look at it as important. Now we are able to get into elementary schools and really start teaching history. My advice would just be to, stay with what your standards say, understand those statutes, and then just communicate with your constituents. Don't keep things hidden. I post things out there. We have the book, our African American Studies book. We have that available at the front. So if somebody'd like to come look at it and see it, they're able to, if they want to see what we're teaching. And just always make sure you follow the standards of the curriculum that's provided for you. And just be open to talk with people, because sometimes they just want you to hear their concern. They don't want you to always solve their concern. And that's one big thing I have learned in this role, is sometimes they just want to share and not necessarily for you to solve it.
Got it. Thank you. All right, Erin, well, thank you. Thank you for sharing your thoughts, your insights, your perspectives. And I know you've got, and this is the beginning of the day, so I know you've got a full day ahead of you. I appreciate you, sharing your insights with our listeners this morning, and appreciate it. So thank you. And to our listeners, thank you for joining this episode of our Scholars Learning video podcast series. Stay tuned for more editions. Thank you.